shiny, they always look the most advanced type weaponry, and so on and so forth. Now, so this is and then one other element is through variety of means, the Mubarak regime consistently perpetuated and affirmed the idea that their role in the Middle East is so critical that if all else fails and Mubarak is about to be overthrown, the stories that were regularly even published in government newspapers is that the American embassy in Cairo houses Marines, and these Marines will intervene militarily to save Mubarak. So basically, any way you try, you're screwed. It's not gonna work. And if the army fails, the security forces fail, then there will be direct American intervention. Well, now this is. It was also mingled with a complex network of not just the stick, but the carrot. Most of the intellectuals who had proven themselves at any level in Egyptian society would go through some point through a duality in their life. One, they would go through an experience of oppression, whether that oppression is like, as Gamal Badawi, the late Gamal Badawi, being abducted, beaten, dropped somewhere in a remote area in Cairo, or like Amdil, who was also abducted, beaten, stripped naked, left to find his home way. But then a benevolent hand extended in which these intellectuals could, if they play right, receive very generous dividends from the government. And just as a quick anecdote, there was an intellectual that I had read one of his books that he's written 5 years ago. His last name was Al-Banna. I don't remember his first name. And I was impressed by the thought of this fellow. By the time I met him, his wife just let it all spill out. She said, "Why are you impressed by my husband? He's a sellout. He gets his little payoff every month, and one of these days I'm gonna write my memoirs and expose him for the sleazebag that he is." Now, leaving aside the possibility that she just didn't like her husband, possible, there were enough indications that this is not a struggling, heroic writer, and so on. So now, add to this a very important element, which will turn out to be quite significant in this analysis, is a consistently, not just impoverished, but a consistently counterproductive, harmful educational system. The good schools are few, limited, but extremely expensive. So they're really open to the sons and daughters of the elite of society. And when I say expensive, I mean they will cost as much as $15,000 a year, or some of them even $20,000 a year. And starting from kindergarten all the way to high school. And if you have that type of money to send your kid there, every person you're going to meet, every child in that school is the son or daughter of someone somehow connected with the government and has a vested interest in the regime. But go beyond that, whether in public schools or private schools that, let's say, cost even £1,000, Egyptian pounds, a year, the educational material is designed to completely obliterate the ability for analytical or critical thinking. Those who've attended Egyptian schools during the Mubarak regime will readily tell you that, in fact, there's sort of a penalty on critical thinking. You cannot engage in critical thinking and get a good grade. Or even worse, you might find yourself arrested for it. Imagine if you actually write a good paper and you get an A from your professor and also get arrested and tortured the same night. It's rather interesting. Now, so all of this, it's the intelligentsia is grounded down an imposing security apparatus. But then another element which is really plays a very key role in this is that there is an elite that rules or attached, a parasitic elite in many ways, attached to the ruling group. I mean, it's not necessarily family, because they're beyond family. There are also friends and some connections and so on. But basically, it's parasitic because they have their own set of laws. Quite often, court judgments mean nothing to them. The way that they are even treated by the police is completely different than the way the police treats a normal citizen. And a massively corrupt interdependent system. I mean, just to give you some quick examples of that, Mubarak has two sons, Ala and Gamal, and Gamal was well known to have a network of friends, among them a fellow called Izz. Izz had a complete monopoly over the steel industry in Egypt, would raise the price of Egyptian steel tenfold, just like that. And at the same time, the parliament, which was completely controlled, would pass laws making it virtually impossible to import steel from outside of Egypt. There were various real estate property scandals where prime real estate was sold to the right people with connections to someone in the ruling elite, and sometimes, quite often, people sold to people who are Saudi or not Egyptian. Again, quite often in violation of the law, at ridiculously low prices. So maybe less 10% of market value. And of course, the payoff that received were well known. Another very practical example, there was an infamous incident in which a friend of the Mubarak family ran a shipping business, or it's actually transportation, transported people back and forth from the Red Sea, from Saudi Arabia to Egypt, and Egypt, Saudi Arabia. None of the ships were seaworthy. None of the ships received certification as seaworthy. And on a fateful day, one of the ships drowned, killing 1,200 people. What's remarkable is that then the Mubarak government was remarkable arrogance and just sheer insolence. Allowed this individual to escape, protected from the country, and once the court proceedings were all nullified and the government made sure that there is no judgment rendered against this fellow, security forces met the families of the victims, literally family by family, told them that this individual is going to return to Egypt to pick up the same business practices, and sternly warned that if any of them dares exact revenge, then the Egyptian expression is go behind the sun. Go behind the sun means you disappear, like the scorpion prism or something like that. And these type of incidents, these types of events, left very deep, painful injuries in Egyptian psyche. There was, for years, the Egyptian government had concealed or hid the fact that they were selling a big portion of Egyptian gas to Israel at way below the market price. I think it's $1 a barrel, something ridiculously nominal, and that the person who received the commission for these sales was again one of Mubarak's, a close associate of Mubarak's son. And when it came out, there was a lot of people who were very offended by it. How is it? Why was this hidden from us? Is this a part? And Mubarak government insisted that this is not a part of the Camp David agreement. And it was a bit of a catch-22. If they say it's part of the Camp David agreement, then they would admit there are secret provisions to the Camp David agreement, which they always said do not exist. But if it's not a part of the Camp David agreement, then why are you doing it? And ultimately the way the matter was resolved was a lawsuit was filed. A judge actually ruled against the government, saying that these sales were illegal. And Mubarak got on TV and said, well, they issued the judgment, now let them go enforce it. And it was completely flouted. So, now, this presents a very grim picture, and one can go on and on and on and say a lot of numerous stories. Maybe one of the remarkable things followed both in Tunisia and Egypt was the remarkably unpredictable and haphazard, seemingly haphazard, but not quite, but way in which the people were denied the ability to predict whether their behavior will get them into trouble or not. And it was remarkably, a very powerful psychological way of conducting things, that if one person could write an article saying XYZ, their neighbor could write an article saying exactly the same thing, the neighbor would end up being arrested and tortured, and there would be no apparent logical reason why this person was arrested and tortured while that person was not touched. And make a long story short, eventually someone from the security forces writes some of his memoirs, quite insolently, and says that this is a very effective way to terrorize people. Don't allow people to predict